Great to be with you this morning, looking at one of my favourite passages in the Bible. I want to set the scene this morning by telling you two stories about power. First comes from a footy match that I played in many years ago. Much lower level quality than the big footy match that was on yesterday. Okay, so this was an exhibition game. This was just a few people getting together for a charity. And up until then, I'd really just played school football and hadn't actually played with anyone who was really good at the ruck position. Okay, so we've got Max Gawn here. He's very good in the ruck position. It's usually given to the tallest player in an AFL team. And so that's what had happened in the teams I'd played in. We just found the tallest player and like, oh, you're tallest, all right, you play ruck. And usually they'd not really known how to play the position. And so really, they hadn't been very good at it. But on this particular occasion, we had a guy who was very, very good at playing the ruck position. Now, for starters, he was an enormous human being. Very, very tall, very, very large, massive muscles. That's very handy when you're playing ruck. He was also very coordinated physically. So, just generally able to catch and run and bump and all those sort of things. But he just knew how to play the position. And so me, as one of the other people who was playing next to him, one of the midfielders, I just kept finding that he just kept tapping me the ball. It went straight to me, and I'd sort of be in space, and it would be very easy for us to play well. And I'd never experienced this before. He was brilliant at his position. And he wasn't just good at making himself a great player, he was great at making the team brilliant, setting his teammates up for success. He'd also use his large body to protect his teammates, blocking off opposition so that we didn't get tackled, keeping us protected and safe so that we'd have more time to kick. Also, if he was further downfield, he was always a wonderful target to kick to because he's had this big physical presence that you would always able to go, yes, I'm just going to launch it downfield to this guy. So he was able to use his power, his big physical presence and his skills that he had to make our whole team better. It didn't just improve himself, but he improved everyone on the team. So there's an example of using power for good. But we know that power can also be used negatively. You could probably think of some examples pretty quickly on how different sorts of power can be used negatively. Let me give you an example. I used to do work in a community radio station, and it was almost entirely volunteer run. And what happened in this radio station was that if you were working really hard and you were very enthusiastic, you could quickly get power for yourself in this particular community radio station. And this one guy joined and he was very enthusiastic. He came across very likable, very friendly, and he worked really hard. And so he did quickly get a lot of power for himself and found himself onto the board of directors. What we learned about him after that, though, was that if you disagreed with him on something, then things started to not go very well for you. In fact, he started to turn people against you. He started to go behind your back and manipulate the situation so that things didn't go your way. And very soon, we found that the people in the radio station, there was a lot of conflict and a lot of confusion caused by this guy who was using his power to try and get what he wanted, but playing people off against each other. And it wasn't until people started talking to each other and working out that he was doing it over and over and over again that they realized, oh, okay, he's sort of the center for all of this. Well, eventually, he got called out on it and he left, but he left behind him a trail of destruction and damaged relationships. Power can be used negatively. What I'd like to look at this morning as we look at this story that Jesus tells in Matthew 20 is how power and grace work together, how they interact. And so a lot of these stories that Jesus tells are about grace. Now, before we launch into this, it's going to be worth getting a definition of grace. I often ask my church, what does grace mean? Because it's one of those churchy words that we don't often use a lot outside of church, but it's really good to have a definition. So would anyone like to have a crack? What does grace mean? Unmerited favour. That's a good start. So would anyone like to add anything to that? Or how would we try and phrase it to one of the kids out there in the kids program? How would you try and describe grace to one of them? Trust. Pardon? So it's not something that's not paid back. Yeah, you don't pay someone back. It's not about revenge. Grace is sort of the opposite of revenge. Yeah. It's a gift, yeah. I like the grace is definitely something that's given by God as a gift. So we put all this together and we're starting to get a sense of what God's grace is. Let's chuck a definition up that I like to use on the screen. So grace is God's unearned, undeserved, loving gift. So when God gives us his love, it's not because we deserve it. It's not because we've done something and go, all right, well, come on, God, now that we've done this, you have to give us your love. It's because he's given us his love freely. And so a lot of the stories that Jesus tells are demonstrating to us about God's grace. And this story definitely talks to us about God's grace. But we often think about grace in regards to forgiveness, forgiving our sins. This one is interesting. It's actually not so much about forgiveness. And so let's have a look at the story and work out what's going on here. It's not, and we should say, this story is not about like how much you should pay your workers or like award wages or unionising or something like that. On the surface, it might seem like that, like how much should people get paid. But let's look at it in a bit more detail and see what's going on under the surface. So we have this landowner in the story. He represents God in the story. And he's going into the town to hire some workers. And this is pretty common in Jesus' time. It's still common in some parts of the world where, in Australia, it's often a case that you get a job and then you keep the job, right? You work it day by day and that's your job until you quit or you get fired. But in Jesus' time, often what the farm owners would do is they go in and they say, well, today I need 5 people to work. So they go, I'll take you, and you. And then the next day they go in and go, today I need 3. So I'll take you, and you. And this would just be a thing that they do each day. So the workers would all gather in the one spot and the landowners would come in and just choose who they wanted each day. And so this is the case. He goes in and he takes some people to go and work on the farm. Then he comes back multiple times during the day to take more people out to work. And then right at the end of the day, pretty much at pack-up time, the sun's about to go down, he takes some more people to go and work. Now, these people are going to have hardly any time to do any work once they get to the farm. Probably all they're going to be able to do is to help pack away the tools. But he's still going to take these people who are still waiting to see if there's any work. Now, why do you think these people would have been left to the end? Anyone got any ideas? Why would they not have been picked up for some work?
Maybe they're the dregs.
They're the dregs. Well, yes, they are the dregs. So for the other farmers, they don't want them. So what might it be about these workers that means that they've been left? All the farm owners have come through and they've picked other workers and they haven't picked these guys. Why wouldn't they have picked them? They might be old, yeah. They could be disabled, yeah. Unable to work, yeah. Yeah, they could be maybe injured or sick, or maybe they've got a bad reputation. Now, I was chatting with a guy, I looked at this passage with a guy last year, and he'd lived in Bangladesh for a while, one of the poorest countries in the world at the moment, and they have this system where people go in, the landowners go in and they pick workers each morning, and he said usually the people who were left, they were on crutches or they had their arm in a sling, or they had some sort of disability. So they were usually the people who were left to the end. So most likely, this is the case in Jesus' time. So the people who are left at the end, are somehow not able to be effective workers in the way that a fit, strong person would be able to. So he takes these people to do some work as well. Then we get this, so they do a little bit of work, and then we get this twist at the end of the story at verse 8. And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the labourers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first." This is probably a bit unexpected. Okay, we're getting this sense here that something strange is happening here. The last people are getting paid first. Just logically, we'd expect the people who worked first to get paid first, but that's not happening. And as we know the end of the story, so we know that Jesus wants the people who worked first to be around to see who gets paid what, so that they can have a bit of a conversation about this. And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each of them received a denarius. Denarius is a currency in Jesus' time. Now, when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, which in my mind is logical, but each of them also received a denarius. So everyone's been paid exactly the same, no matter how many hours they've worked. Now, to be fair to those who worked the longest, that is what they agreed to work for at the start of the day. That was the deal that they struck. On receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, These last worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius?" Now, I wonder how you feel about this story, just at this point. If you were chosen first, let's just assume you were chosen first, you'd work the whole day. Hot day, Middle Eastern heat, and then you get paid the same as the people who just turned up right at the end and just helped pack up the tools. How would you feel about it? Just be honest with yourself. Would you have been grumpy about it? Would you have raised your voice about it? And if you had, no judgment from me, I think I would have. So let's just have a chat to each other. Turn to the people around you. Just have a quick chat. If you were grumpy about it, why? Just think about why. Why would you have been grumpy about people getting paid the same? Quick chat. Well, we'll look at a clue as to why these particular workers were grumpy about their situation in a moment. And then we'll do some reflecting on our own hearts towards the end of the talk. But let's have a look at the conversation, how it flows from here. So verse 13, the landowner replied to them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius?" Which is true, right? At the start of the day, they agreed, you do a day's work for a denarius, and they all agreed that was fine. "Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity?" The thing about this story is, no one is getting ripped off. No one's getting ripped off. The controversy of this story is that the landowner is being generous. He's not being stingy. He's not being cheap. He's being generous. The reason that those workers are grumpy and are complaining is because the landowner has been generous to other people. That's the controversy of the story. And this is a really important thing for us to be reflecting on and to be challenged by. They're upset because of the landowner's generosity to other people. This really triggered a memory for me of a camp discussion group that I led. It was mostly years 10, 11 and 12s. And it turned out that this group, I think the entire group had been raised in Christian families. So they'd been going to church their entire life. And we were talking about grace. We were talking about the fact that it's God's unearned, undeserved loving gift. And so that meant that if someone at their school who didn't know Jesus, who perhaps had even teased them for following Jesus, gave their life to Jesus, that they would receive forgiveness for their sins and all the blessings that we as followers of Jesus receive. And the group kind of didn't like that. They were like, that's unfair that they get to catch up straight away. We've been following Jesus, we've been doing all the hard work, and they were kind of annoyed about this idea of grace, which was kind of a surprise to us as me and my co-leader, because we thought grace was awesome. And then we had this group sort of challenging us and complaining about it. But I've realised there's quite a few stories that Jesus tells where people don't really like grace. See, grace is awesome when it's for me, but what about when it's for other people? That's quite a challenge. So we're called to follow Jesus, so we receive grace, and we're also called to share grace with others. And so we're presented with this question of, is it unfair when God is generous? And I think the real standout moment for me in the way that the early workers respond is in verse 12. They say, these last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us. You've made them equal to us. So they're not complaining about the amount of money. They're not going, oh, we don't have enough. We're not going to be able to pay for our food. We need more cash or anything like that. It's the fact that they have been stripped of their power. They had superiority because they expected to get paid more. They'd been chosen first. Farmer, the landowner to come in, boom, I'm going to pick you, you, and you. You're going to come and work for me. Yes, we're going to get paid more. We're chosen first. We have status. We have superiority. Our money makes us better people than those guys who get picked second, third, fourth, fifth. And now you've paid them all the same. Now we're on the same level. They've been stripped of their power. They've been stripped of their privilege. They've been stripped of their status because of grace. And this is the thing about God's grace. It means in God's kingdom, we're all equal. Not everyone here gets paid the same, but we're all equal in God's eyes. Not everyone here is the same age, the same experience with following Jesus, but we're all equal in God's eyes. Not everyone here is the same physical power, but we are all equal in God's kingdom. No one receives more love from God, more blessing from God. His promises are for all of us. And that can be really controversial, but it's true. And it can be really challenging for people to hear when it challenges what we hold on to as things that give us power and us status and us privilege. When it challenges those parts of our lives where we hold on to things. Let's think about a few areas where we do hold that. Obviously, money is important for these guys in the story. Money really does give us power and status. You can see this in all areas of life. And when that's challenged, whoa, people can get pretty angry. A few other areas where we get power. I mentioned physical strength earlier with that example from football. We're just born into that, aren't we? You don't choose to be really tall and massive. It's just sort of given that by your parents and by God. Same with good looks. Some people are good looking, and people just are given power when they're good looking. It just seems to be our way our society works. Some people inherit their wealth. So your family's wealthy, so you've just got money. Again, it's not something you've earned, it's just something that comes your way. And then there's those natural skills that can sometimes give us power, isn't it? Sometimes we're just born good at music or mathematics or systems or engineering. People are just really good at it, and that can give us power if we use it in certain ways. Then there's stuff that we can earn. We can get that guy in the radio station worked hard and earned himself power in that organisation. So we can earn roles in particular groups, leadership roles, this sort of thing in teams, as well as social status. And for those of you in high school, you know how this works, where you can really just manipulate people. You see it. People manipulate their way into having social status in high school. And it doesn't stop when you become an adult, just it's a bit different. And so we can get power in all these different situations. Now, as we've seen, power can be used for good. So it's not wrong to be physically strong. It's not wrong to be good looking. It's not wrong to have inherited money, these sort of things. But it can be used for good, but it can also be used negatively. And if we hold on to it too tightly, and if we value it too much, it becomes a false god, it becomes an idol. And when grace comes along and levels the playing field and says that stuff doesn't matter, then we get a shock. So this is how you know if power is a problem for you, because this is very subtle. I'm going to suggest over 50% of the people in the room have a problem with power in one area of your life. You may not realise it until it's challenged. And the way you know it's challenged, the way you know you've got a problem with it is when you lose that power, you'll start feeling bitterness and resentment and anger. That's how you know you had an issue. If that power is challenged or if it's gone. Or, how about this? If we have a deep desire for power that is unhealthy and is a problem, then people around us will tend to feel used. They won't feel valued. They'll feel like, you're just using them for your own personal gain. Whereas if you've got grace as much more of a focus and power is not having that unhealthy position in your life, then people are more likely to experience compassion and they're more likely to experience generosity from you. So that's a good little reflection for you to do. If you've lost power, how did you feel? Were you angry about it? Resentful? You probably were holding on too tight. Do people experience compassion from you? Do they experience generosity? If not, you might need to let go of some power and embrace grace more in your life. This story has a lot of good news in it. The good news is that God is gracious and that God is generous. Let's think about it. Everyone in this story gets paid well. Everyone got paid fairly. All of them. The majority of the people in this story got chosen later in the day. So these were the dregs, the people who got left, who weren't the best, but the landowner who represents God came and chose them to work for him anyway, and he paid them well. And it wasn't grudgingly, it wasn't like, I guess I better pay them. Delighted him to pay them. He wanted to pay them well. So we can be encouraged that with all our failures and all our stuff-ups, and maybe we have held power too tightly, and maybe we have used people a bit, and none of us here are perfect. That God will choose us and will show us grace. Does show us grace, because that's what he's like. He's good. He's generous. He's gracious. In Jesus, we don't have to prove ourselves to other people. We don't have to prove ourselves to ourselves. because of who God is and because of what Jesus has done. We can't earn anything from God. He delights to show us his love. And he set us a wonderful example in Jesus. To finish, I'd love to just lead us in a prayer. As I mentioned, this challenge of holding on to power, it can be quite subtle, and it can be that thing of where you may not realize you're doing it until God shows you. So why don't we just ask God to show us if it's an issue? I'm confident it will be an issue for some of us this morning. So why don't we close our eyes and just invite God to speak to us this morning and reveal what he needs to reveal.